Of course. All righty, folks. Welcome. Sorry for the delay. We have some technical issues on the back end, and I'm very, very happy that you were able to join us. Nevertheless, I apologize for the delay once again. We are recording this webinar, so please be on your best behavior. We'll start in a moment. I see that people are joining us, so we'll give it another 2-3 seconds, although we're late, but just to allow people to join us nevertheless. Welcome. All righty, I think we're just about ready to begin. My name is Eli Saltzman. I'm an associate research professor of visual studies and the director of the Gildenhorn Institute for Visual Studies at the University of Maryland at College Park. I'd like to express my deepest and most sincere gratitude to Avis Koyman and Rongrong Zhang for all their assistance behind the scenes that make this and all other events possible. I would like also to thank the audience for joining us today for the online book talk titled State of Shock, the Kibbutz in Israel from Avant-Garde to Fetish, 1948-1955, featuring Dr. Lior Libman, whom I'll introduce in a moment. I'd like to mention and take advantage of this opportunity to say that our next online event is actually a panel titled Democracy, Dissent, and Pluralism in Israel Today, where a fantastic lineup of speakers will talk about the current political situation in Israel and possibly think about the next election cycle that may or may not happen over the summer. The event will take place on Tuesday, May 5th at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information and to register, please visit www.israelstudies.umd.edu. I must come clean and declare my not nefarious, but certainly vested interest in today's talk. I was born in Kibbutz Shlosha in the Western Negev, in what is known as the Gaza envelope. So when I saw the announcement that Dr. Libman's book was published, I could not wait to have her over and give a talk for us. Generally speaking, many kibbutzim, several of those, but several prominent ones, the Ganya is perhaps one of the most prominent one. The first one predated the establishment of the State of Israel and played a major role in the creation of the Jewish state. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, however, the kibbutzim were far more than rural communities or communes. Socially, they functioned as a lab for collective living, advancing egalitarian ideals, and forging new models of community and identity. Politically, they were deeply embedded in the leadership structures of the emerging state with outsized representation in key parties and institutions, helping to shape national priorities and strategic decisions. Economically, despite their relatively small share of the population, they contributed significantly to agricultural settlement and the consolidation of territorial presence, playing a central role in state-building efforts. And yet, this book argues that the significance of the kibbutz extends far beyond its material contribution. It became a symbol, at times idealized, even mythologized, of the Zionist project itself, reflecting both aspirations and tensions within Israeli society during a period of profound transformation. So it is my pleasure and honor to introduce today's speaker who will help us navigate these formative years and the kibbutz's shifting roles as depicted in her recently published book. Dr. Lior Libman is an associate professor of visual studies and the director of the Center for Visual Studies at Binghamton University. She is a literary scholar and a cultural historian specializing in socialist Zionism and the kibbutz movement. Currently, she's working on two projects, one on the kibbutz image in modern Hebrew literature, and the other on the Zionist left in the aftermath of 1967. As always in these events, Dr. Libman will speak for around 30 minutes or so, after which we will open the floor, quote unquote, for Q&A that I will moderate. So to the audience, please feel free to type your questions in the designated Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. I will help Professor Libman with PowerPoint, so whenever you want me to switch, just say skip or something. Dr. Libman, the floor is all yours, my friend. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Saltzman, Eli, and hello, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you this evening. Thank you for coming. It's a bit weird, right? We're talking about kibbutz and community and home and many themes that will come through the talk, and I don't see the audience. I don't see anyone. So I'll try my best as if we are sitting in the same room in a circle and talk. What I want to do this evening is two things, or two parts to this talk. The first one, I will give you an overview, very brief overview of the book as it's structured and what does it do. And later we'll delve also not very deep, just as an introduction to a textual and historical example that is further discussed and analyzed in the book itself. So, Eli, let's start with the first slide here. And we'll say that State of Shock examines the political imagination of the kibbutz in the transition from the yishuv to the state. And let's unpack it a little bit. Let's start with talking about what is kibbutz, what is transition, and what is political imagination. Eli, click. Okay. Wow. Okay, you did all of them at once. Beseder. So the first one, what do I mean when I talk about the kibbutz? The book is called The Kibbutz in Israel. And those of us who are familiar with the kibbutz movement or the history of the kibbutz movement know that this is some kind of abstractization. Of course, historically, we're talking about different streams and different characteristics and histories of each one of the streams. But in this book, I talk about the kibbutz as a form, as a political, social, ideological, and I'll say a word about my usage and understanding of the word ideology in a few minutes. But I talk about it as an entity, right? As a creature, as a type of seeing, as if you like, but also more specifically for methodological and historical reasons, the book is focusing on a kibbutz Avant-Garde movement. This is a kibbutz, countrywide kibbutz movement that was founded as early as 1927. And the methodological reason is that there is a lot of material, and you need to do some kind of, corpus building according to all kind of considerations, theoretical and historical. And the choice in the kibbutz movement, it's not only because my own kibbutz, apropos Eli's introduction, belonged to the, historically to the kibbutz Avant-Garde movement, but mainly because that was at the eve of the state, the largest and most prominent of all the streams that composed the kibbutz movement. The largest number of people, but also the prominence also came from its nature as a very activist, avant-gardic thinking leadership that saw its place in the national leadership and the general leadership of the yishuv, and indeed during the years of the yishuv, particularly in the 30s and 40s, it was the most, the largest and most active organized body within not only the kibbutz movement, but also the Israeli labor movement, I would, or not Israeli, the Yishuvist, Hebrew labor movement, and the Histadrut, and the union, the workers' union at the time. And in that sense, it's emblematic to the story of the kibbutz generally. Phenomena that we see there, we see in more extreme because, or unlike other kibbutz movements, it sought to occupy the main leadership of the state. And the numbers and the missions, and it was much more active. But we see it in larger scale and in different ways, the transition or the implications of the transitions also in the other kibbutz movement. So I wanted to say it's a kibbutz המאוחד, to kind of like specify the sources that I'm working with. Now, transition. We talked about transition, and Eli, you mentioned the prominence and then the changes that occurred with the foundation of the state. So normally, usually we look at it from a political or social perspective. This change, and it's a profound change of transition of the Yishuv from a semi-organized and mainly voluntary political system into a state that operates by the power of law and the institutionalized formation. It's true that the Yishuv was highly institutionalized as well, but it was voluntary, and it was composed of voluntary bodies, such as a Kibbutz המאוחד as one of the prominent in them. And that differed dramatically, right, from a Jewish organized voluntary community under, in that case, the British mandate, right, to be a Jewish state government mechanism of law enforcement and, of course, monopolization of power. So many times when we describe this transition in the literature, we look more at the political or social implications of that. And usually the explanation is that the kibbutz lost its prominence in activism and importance in the main tasks of the Yishuv period, which were integration and absorption of integration of newcomers to the land, and then security or defense, and settlement, of course, right? These things were performed by the kibbutz, and then when the state came in and took some kind of took it as its official role and built mechanisms to deal with it, the kibbutz was redundant in some way or unnecessary in some way. And others are talking about, from perspective of social history, they talk a little bit about this transition from voluntary into a sovereign system. But I was mainly interested to understand the political imagination of the kibbutz in these conditions. And here we are going to political imagination. And this is, for me, especially growing up in a kibbutz, I always felt that there is some gap between the story of life, how we narrate life, how we give meaning to life, and our life story of what's going on, on the ground as it is. And I was curious to understand how the kibbutz thought of himself, understood itself, imagined itself in this new situation, politically and socially, the situation of transition that Eli referred to in the beginning, and we just touched upon briefly. Political imagination also connected for me in the book with the notion of ideology. The ideology, as we say it in colloquial language, and we'll see Ben-Gurion uses it also in colloquial terms later in the talk. We talk about set of ideas, and I use in the book an Althusarian, or following the philosopher Louis Althusser, definition of ideology as the imagined relation to actual reality, namely the story that we tell, the conceptualization or orientation that we give to our existence in the world. And in that sense, I was trying to understand the ideology of the kibbutz through these stories. What happens to the way the kibbutz understands itself in the world, understand its mission, understand its place, And for me, it was very natural to look for it in the actual stories that are being told, namely in the literature of the period. But I have to say that what I found, I'll talk about it in a second, it's across the discourse. You can see it in the literature, of course, but you can see it also in public addresses, and you can see it in ceremonial texts in the kibbutzim. You can find it in local kibbutzim newspaper. You can also find it sometimes in letters, in diaries, in correspondence, or minutes of meetings and things like that. So both archival, press, and literary material bring to the fore a very important and notable finding, which we'll find in the next slide, Eli, which is a notable gap between dynamic realities, and I say here realities in plural, and static representation, which I say in singular. Because we see, and here I put, somewhat simplistically, I put on that slide the image from the cover of the book. The image from the cover of the book it's a work, it's later work, it's from the late 70s by the kibbutz artist Yuval Danieli. But when I saw it in Givat Chaviva, when I came to visit him and look at all kind of visual material, I thought, wow, it almost visualizes the shock, the state of shock. This is only a detail from the work, but in the middle of this very stormy years of change, years of massive immigration, of building a government, of founding an army, things that we're going to talk about very soon, the kibbutz keeps imagines itself as it imagines itself at the time of the Yishuv. We see somewhat a frozen image, frozen representation. And it goes in the directions of being avant-garde, of being heroic, of being the first and foremost tool of the Zionist endeavor, but also the most important, or the most complete or important fulfillment of the Zionism as it's being understood by the kibbutz, as opposed, of course, to the state, right? The state is usually, and definitely in Zionist historiography, continued to be the ultimate, goal that was once achieved. And we see that for the kibbutz, many times there is no state. In the early years of state, when the kibbutz represents itself, it's not that people are not aware of the changes and the challenges that the kibbutz faces. But as I show in huge number of texts in the book, in front of that, they say, let's go back, or let's, preserve the vision of our youth, right? Or the kibbutz as it was understood and represented during the Yishuv. And that raises the question, click, what happens to a creative, activist, adventure, avant-garde imagination that it had frozen? That was, for me, that was the most puzzling thing here. I said, okay, the kibbutz is something original, historically speaking, right? It's a very adventurous and unique and bold invention and development. Kibbutz always developed and always changed and always reacted to historical circumstances and changing. And then there is a moment where it stops. It's like something compulsively repeating as identical to itself and unable to adjust, unable to reimagine, unable to kind of like open to the realities that are so dynamic. And that's where I started the journey. So in part, the first thing I wanted to understand is how the kibbutz understood itself before. Like, what are the origins of this image or the story, or what is the emotional attachments to the story as it was before, the story that later could not change. So Eli, if you can click again, the part 1 of the book deals with the basic ideological unit of the kibbutz. We talked earlier about my usage of the term ideology. So what is the main story, or the defining motive of this story? And this is that of fulfillment, of Hagshama, which I want to say a few words on. Eli, can you click, please? Let's go with only one for now. If you can take one off, just one click. Okay, both of them came, okay. So the first chapter, it's called Hagshama, the political theology of the kibbutz. And there I'm trying to understand the anatomy, the conceptual anatomy of this idea of living out and embodying in every deed and every day a meta-narrative of return, salvation, return to the land, salvation of humankind, salvation of Jewish people. What is the mechanism that connects the abstract and the concrete, right? Because Hagshama, we see it from the word, the Hebrew speakers here in the audience. I can't see, I don't know who is listening. I'm talking to the void. But the word, of course, has a very strong material meaning in Hebrew, and it's even a scene, right, that is changing throughout generation, that with the second Aliyah and the third Aliyah in particularly, in the context of a kibbutz hamauchad, the idea that you yourself embody the absolute, and you yourself are the creator that embodies the absolute. And this relationship between Hagshama and Avodah b'gashmiyut, right, taking the absolute and make it concrete, comes from Hasidism, which was also the biographical background of many of the people that came during these periods and founded the kibbutzim. And we can talk about it a bit later if we want. But mainly it's the idea that you live out some kind of grand narrative that in your everyday and every effort and the practicalities of everyday, the kibbutz is a total institution, right? Everything from the way you eat to the way you sleep to the way you shower, it speaks and revive an ideal. Nothing has a meaning just at the level of the material meaning. It's always with the absolute and the metaphysical. You act out of voluntarily, out of belief. You are moved and motivated by internal decree that leads you to do what you do, right? That's the essence of Hagshama. You live your belief. You live out your belief every day, every moment. And with the foundation of the state, what I say, the shock is not coming so much from the political and social marginalization, although of course it plays a role and it interrelated, but mainly what happens is that the way the state thinks of the presence of the absolute in the concrete, right, in the mundane, is top down. It's the law that kind of like create a new kind of reality, a new kind of, I use in the book, I use this metaphor of divine intervention, as opposed to the kibbutz is not, the kibbutz feels responsibility for the ideal and not submission for the ideal. Right? The kibbutz creates it from below and lives it out. The kibbutz does not get some kind of external decree and just performs it. And that was a big shattering moment, that epistemologically something was not capable to reset, if you want. The idea that the kibbutz is now tool or part of the state and does not in and of itself lives out its own creed. This is the clash. So chapter 1 goes in depth to this perception of Agshama and its Hasidic influences and neo-Hasidic kind of like mediators that recreated Hasidism in some ways that enabled the cosmic narrative of Hasidism, the relationship between the yesh and the end, between the abstract and the abstract and the concrete, or the absolute and the mundane. This narrative is being translated to secular and national terminology, and that's chapter 1 shows that, and all of the literary lineage that leads to that. And chapter 2 in part 1 shows the clash between that. It goes and tries to understand the way in which the state and sovereignty generally creates a new kind of condition that is epistemologically completely different, and it confuses the kibbutz. It creates this shock, or even I would say cultural trauma, traumatic moment, in which you cannot really understand yourself or find yourself in the old coordinations of thought in the new reality that is now being created. And the kibbutz is expected to do all kinds of things that completely tear it apart from its perception of Agshama as life and mission as one, right? That they are connected. You live out your belief constantly, and then you have a situation where what you believe and the way you live in the new condition are separated and apart. And that shatters the main ideological unit, the main story of me as living out what I believe in. That might become a bit clearer in the second part of the book, Eli Click. The second part of the book looks at the raptures, historical raptures that happened in different contexts. And I remind you that we say realities and representation. Representation is one and repeat, but realities are different historical contexts in which this connection between the internal decree and the surrounding that the kibbutz need to cope with, bring to the fore this rupture. Eli, click, please. The first one has to do with the first chapter in part 2 has to do with the relationship between land and state. Kibbutz המאוחד specifically, but not only. Also, השומר הצעיר is another prominent stream in the kibbutz movement, although from different reasons, but I'm not going here into all of the details in the book, but they believed and saw the Jewish settlement and first of all, not necessarily sovereignty, right? The state was not the vision that they sought, that they had in their mind when they thought of Jewish self-determination in the land. They sought more of something that we can call decentralized, anarchist kind of Jewish formation, in which it will be political formation in which there will be chain of communes, kibbutzim, all kind of sizes, some of them Jewish, some of them not Jewish, that are connected in the space of the land. And the state had, it meant first and foremost the partition, right? Effectively, since 1942, and the exception of the Biltmore plan, it meant that the state will not be in what they call Greater Israel or Eretz Israel Hashlema, which they thought is the historical cradle of the Jewish people, and there should be gradually achieved Jewish majority, then that will organically lead to Jewish self-determination there. They were very much anti-imperialist and against the intervention of the Brits or the UN generally in the whole question of the partition. And they looked at the state as something that is temporary, that is partial, and mainly that disconnects them from this vision of Jewish self-determination in the greater land, of course, the land of the ancestors, the land of the biblical, historical existence of the Jewish people, according to the kibbutz founders. And this is something that is being dealt with in the previous part on Agshama more. What was the investment of holiness in this process of renewal and revival and everything that the kibbutz tried to do? Why it was so important to do it in the land of Israel? It was never completely secular in the way it was understood, even if it was described in historical terms. Or the Bible plays a huge role in the way they understand themselves as creating new life in the land, in the proximity between ideal and life, in the perception of Agshama, and of course, in the perception of what is the land. And the state cut them from the land. And yet, they continue to represent the kibbutz and the land as one and whole. And there are many examples that are given to that in the book. Some of them went to claim that up to the late 60s, and in my current work about the Zionist left after 67, there is a lot of place to these kind of perceptions, especially after the war, when the West Bank, Gaza, the Golan Heights, and of course East Jerusalem become part of Israel. So this is a chapter about this rupture. Let's move to the next one. The next one is the dissolution of the Palmach or the militia. The Palmach is the strike force of the Haganah and the voluntary army without strict, not army, it's not an army, right? It's a militia. It's underground organization, but voluntary, kind of like army with no rules, with no official professional kind of like discipline, uniform, distance, all of that. But mainly it's an organization that fights for a cause, and it saw itself. And may I remind us that the Palmach, at least in its first years, were mainly active against the Brits, and is an anti-colonial or anti-imperial force for them. It was local force of liberation, an army of workers, army that is it's a non-militaristic militia, right? If we want to say that. And the Kibbutz HaMaochad adopted the Palmach. I'm not going into all of the history here, but of course it's in the book, how it was done and why it was done. And not only it adopted it, it was the apple of its eyes, because it was like taking defense seriously, but in a way that combined also kibbutz life and camaraderie. And the Palmach, like other organizations, had to be absorbed into the army by the order of Ben-Gurion, and his idea of mamlachtiyut, of the generality and statism, and no sub-organization of any kind. And the Palmach specifically was called by rivals of Tabenkin and Tabenkin, the leader of a Kibbutz HaMaochad, rivals and supporters, as Tabenkin's private army. It was called like that because it was very tuned and listened, and also demographically composed mainly of supporters of Kibbutz HaMaochad, Achdut HaAvoda, which was its political party, Umapam since 1948, with the unification of Achdut HaAvoda with Shomer HaTzair party. So it was mainly identified with the Zionist left of Mapai, the Ben-Gurion central party, or hegemonic government. Ben-Gurion thought in different terms. He thought of terms of monopolization of power, of professional army of a state, with ranks, with uniforms, with hierarchy, one army that is of the state, not with sub-organization or sub-units. And for a Kibbutz HaMaochad in particular, it looked like he kills their spirit and kills their ethos and their values and their non-militaristic kind of like kibbutz life that are combined also with defense when defense is needed, right? The militia usually reacts to some kind of break in the social order. It's not a regular army that is active, and that the idea that the Palmach will now be part of the state was, of the IDF, and that there will be no anti-militaristic militia and not be a popular army, was seen as very much as a clash with the ethos of the kibbutz and tearing him apart from his creed. And what we see in the literature and in the representation is that, like the quote here, who said our song has ended, the Palmach is going to come back. The Palmach is the living dead, right? It's going to come back, and it never actually disappeared. Like the state is partial and temporary, the same with the army, right? The Palmach is there to come back, not to amend, not to integrate in the IDF in some way, but to stand in front of it and say, no, I mean, our ethos is the ethos. Let's go to the next chapter here, and that's the 1948 war. Well, this is a very complicated chapter. We're gonna talk about it in a few minutes with our example, but mainly two things here raptured the kibbutz from its creed. One was that the whole perception of the kibbutz as a place that stands and guards the borders, that settlement is also a means of defense, and that they are fighting for their home out of authentic attachment, and did not hold some kibbutzim destroyed and were never built. Some of them had to be evacuated. Of course, when I wrote it, I never thought of today, but today it sounds completely imaginative that the kibbutz will be away from its site for 2 years. And but things like that happened, and that completely kind of shaked this idea that we are the forefront, the avant-garde, we are guarding the border, will pass where the fields are, right? Where we are guarding and keeping the land. But that was only one side of the horrific contradiction that they felt. Of course, the other side was the kibbutz's part in the Palestinian Nakba, both during the war and after the war, when kibbutzim settled on lands of depopulated Palestinian villages. And that put or sharpened the contradiction that is kind of like built in to the kibbutz existence. And this is between, of course, particularism and universalism, between Zionism and socialism, between the commitment to the Zionist cause and ethos, and the universalist aspirations of socialism and building a completely new society, and of course the brotherhood of nation that the kibbutz aspire to embody and realized. And in this chapter, I bring some texts that are very bitter realizations that cannot go together. And the choice, the choice was many times, or all the times, for Zionism, but it didn't go without some kind of traumatic moment of being the victimizer and divorced from your universalist socialist creed. Next is the chapter, the state mechanisms control. We talked about it briefly before, but whereas the kibbutz during the Yishuv period led through the Palmach security, but even before the Palmach security endeavors, it was a major hub for newcomers to the land, also fostering immigration to the land with a huge chain of embassies not embassies, well, I guess you could say that people that were sent from the kibbutz abroad to Chalutz and to youth movement abroad to organize immigration and then absorb them in the kibbutzim. Then the kibbutz finds itself need to operate in the state according to interests of the state that wanted it to absorb or help absorb the great waves of immigration from Middle East, North Africa, mainly during the first year of statehood, and the inability of the kibbutz to change its own perception and self-perception, and the huge threat that they felt when they were not able, on the one hand, to take this role of being involved in the most important and profound process that is taking place, and the feeling, on the other hand, that they are being erased by the state, that the state wants them to do it on the expense of their own creed, a way of life, a correlation between mission and way of life, and inability to change. On the one hand, they wanted to do that, and on the other hand, they were unable to do it. That's exactly the shock that, hey, who are we in that situation? And the response was, as we see here, the kibbutz is still the main road. We are still the avant-garde. We are still leading society, despite the fact that Israeli realities moved away from the kibbutz in that sense. The kibbutz could not take a major part there. And the last but not least chapter in this part is the orientation towards the Soviet Union, which again was a huge inspiration for the kibbutz, mainly inspiration as an educational symbol, as some kind of a regulative idea. Of course, the scale and the political circumstances are very, very different, and I discuss it in the book. But the very fact that there was full-scale socialism that was practiced and realized in some other place was all the time some kind of a star in the horizon that shows red star in the horizon that shows the direction. And then there is a state, and the state has official foreign relations and foreign policy. And despite the fact that Israel technically is neutral in the Cold War, obviously it goes with the West and social democratic direction and not a socialist one. And the kibbutz all the time feels that the only thing that prevents the recognition of the Soviet Union. So on the one hand, it's an unanswered love. On the one hand, they admire the Soviet Union. On the other hand, the Soviet Union doesn't recognize Israel. Or I don't know. It doesn't. It's not precise. It recognized, but it's condemns Zionism as imperialism and the Western. And the kibbutz is convinced that it's only the specific government that stands in the way. They continue, at least until the mid-50s, long for the Soviet Union and feel that they are locked or trapped in a state that takes them, that rupture them from belonging to the world of tomorrow, Moscow, and be recognized and integrated into the world they believe in. And again, the response is onward to the yearned shore, right? We will strive and try to go there and to be accepted there as if there is no state. So in all of these examples, what we mainly see is this set of ruptures between different aspects of the newly created Israeli realities, be it in terms of territory, in terms of structural elements or institutional elements, in terms of the international orientation, and of course the meaning, the actual meaning of achieving Israeli sovereignty in the land, or Jewish sovereignty in the land. And all of these ruptures get the same answer or the same response in different texts, in different genres, in different articulations, but all of them are like, things will be as they were. The kibbutz is the main road. We are leading in the right direction, and we live the creed in its fullness, despite the fact that we don't, right? But the creed does not change. Now, let's look at one example just to maybe flesh it out a little bit more, and then we'll leave time for questions because I feel like I condensed a whole book. And I try to give you a few sentences on each one, but I feel that each one can be a talk. So let's look at one example from the 1948 war. And I chose this example also because, as you will see in a few minutes, there are some echoes to the present. But also because here, with the sources I'm going to bring, there is some kind of a direct clash in a way that is easy to show. So we're going to look at the play in the Negev Desert, Barvot Negev, which was produced in Habima National Theater in February 1949. It was written by Yigal Mosenzon. Mosenzon at the time was a member of Kibbutz Na'an, HaKibbutz HaMochad movement. Before writing the play, was also a member of the Palmach. And during the 48 war, he was a cultural officer of the Givati Brigade that fought in the south. Right after the war, or officially the war is not over, right? It's the time, the end of the war. But even before the war is over, Mosenzon is being asked by Habima, by the National Theater, to write a play from the actualities of the period. Something about, this is a time where Israeli drama kind of like escorts the effort. And he's at that point, he's writing one of the most, he writes it in 2 weeks or something, but he writes something that becomes later one of the most popular and talked about plays of the period. And he takes as an inspiration the story of Kibbutz Negba. Eli, give us a click here. Kibbutz Negba was founded in 1939 as a tower and stockade settlement. And at the time when it was founded, it was this, you can hear from the name, Negba, right? Going to the Negev, to the south. It was the southern point out of, other than Sdom, of Jewish settlement when it was founded. And in 1948, it found itself between the months of May and July 1948. It suffered heavy attacks from the Egyptian army, which tried to occupy the area for strategic reasons. And the members were well trained, but they were entrenched and mined from all directions. And they faced bombing from the air, artillery from the ground, and raids into the kibbutz. They were reinforced by the soldiers of the Givati Brigade that we mentioned, and their heroic insistence to stay in the kibbutz and fight in the kibbutz and don't leave it was already at the time some kind of a symbol. It was called Negbagrad, right? Like with a reference to Stalingrad, to show resistance, insistence, and so on. So that captured, of course, the imagination of Mosenzon, that decided to base his play on that. Eli? Okay. So the play is based in the fictional kibbutz Givat Yoav, that is based on Negba. And it's almost funny to say. The dramatic conflict there is between the soldiers and the kibbutz members. The Egyptian army is only in the background as the enemy, but the real fight is happening in the play, is happening inside of the kibbutz, and it's between the soldiers that say, as we see on the screen, from a literary perspective, there is no point in resistance. The decision to stay is like suicide. Worse, it's literally slaughter. This is a military issue. It is for the army to decide. You should understand that an expert cook like Rivka is not allowed to advise me how to act tactically or operatively. This is a military issue. This is a text by Baruch, the commander of the kibbutz, as the kibbutz outpost, a soldier, officer in Givati that was sent there. To that, the kibbutz people represented by Avram the Mazkir, the secretary of the kibbutz, answer Eli. He says, here sit people who gave 20 years of their lives to this sandy and poor soil. Do you understand? 25 years of her life grants the cook the right to decide if she leaves her home, and especially Baruch, if she is ready to fight for this home. Her considerations are not based on machine guns, but they are keeping the people next to the machine guns. And he says, there are no lands, only places which you do not live. That is. And so he says, even if there is no military rationale, the love we loved here, the children, the thousands of moments that we had, days and nights that we spent here, this is what gives us the power, the strength, the legitimation, the standing in arms here against the threat, the military threat. Later in the play, Eli, if you could, Avram sent his son Dan to a very, very complicated, dangerous, deadly mission of taking out of the kibbutz, driving out of the kibbutz, the wounded from the kibbutz, and on his way back, he's going on, he's killed, and they find a way to go out of the kibbutz and bring him from the road, and it ended with this excitement of all of the characters. They say, now we will bury him at home. Dan returned home. Here he is, home again, home again. He's laid in Bikat Yoav cradle, a great cradle. You see the excessiveness of home, connection to the land, fighting for something that is from internal creed, from a connection again between mission and home, and organic kind of like attachment, and not a military or command consideration. So we see that the play of Mosenson, despite the fact that he was a cultural officer of Givati, right, of the soldiers that actually fought there, what actually was important to emphasize in this play, that again was not marginal, it was commissioned for Habima, for the National Theater, was the authentic attachment of the settler, and not the mechanistic command of the soldier. Or if we want to take it back to the clash of models, it's the internal belief and struggle and courage and vigor and resourcefulness, as opposed to the external imposed almost I said mechanistic as opposed to a organic way of thinking that characterize the Hagshama. So the concrete or the local and the concrete are preferred to the general or the front line, or the abstract, the state, or right, a big cause that is not embodied in the everyday, that is not embodied in the existence as such, that is not hagshama in the very concrete and material sense of that. And it was clear that this in the fight, this or the dramatic conflict there, Mosenson is with the kibbutz and not with the state represented by the army. His affinities to the Palmach, the militia that fights for a cause and from the heart, is much more profound than its respect to commands and to commanders and to the army needs. So that caused a huge scandal. The soldiers in Givati felt angry and betrayed by their own cultural officer, and the main cultural officer of Givati, Abba Kovner, the poet, the famous poet, wrote a very strong letter to Habima, and soldiers of Givati went to the shows themselves and put away pamphlets to condemn the show, and sometimes interrupted the show. And mainly they demand that the minister of the Minister of Defense, namely Ben-Gurion, will interfere. And Ben-Gurion indeed interfered. In February 28, 1949, he met not with Mosenson, but with the director and the cast and the main, it was very important, famous actors in that, Meskin and Hannah Robin, like stars of the time, right? People with, went to meet Ben-Gurion and discuss with Ben-Gurion this play. And I think what Ben-Gurion is saying is quite striking. Yeah, let's move to what Ben-Gurion is saying. Yes, let's move to that. And he says there is an idea here. There is an ideology here. He means it in the colloquial term, right? And it is more than an idea. What is the idea for which Avram is fighting? He built a home for 25 years, and he guards this home now. For that was the war. Or was the war for the independence of the homeland, for a state? This is not mentioned. He cannot leave the kibbutz because he needs to guard the home he built over 25 years. It is a distortion like no other of the whole war. The distortion is extremely profound. The whole idea is false. There is no war over the kibbutz someone built, but over the land. If, from a military perspective, they, the army commanders, are calling order to fight here and not there, they, the kibbutz members, would fight here and not there. This is what the people of the kibbutz of En Harod did. This is what the people of kibbutz Mishmar HaEmek did. They did not fight for their home. They fought for something greater. So Ben-Gurion here goes head to head with kibbutz and Mapam prominent writer and says, no, ladies and gentlemen, there is now something new. There is no such a thing anymore that you fight for your own, for the local, the concrete, the immediate, that you embody in your own actual life a certain idea, but that you are part of something that is greater and bigger, and this is the state, and the state is what kind of like decides of the order of things. It creates a completely different order of things that the kibbutz is not able to completely grasp. So this is an early example from 1949, but definitely we can see it all throughout the early 50s, that the kibbutz turns from avant-garde, from a living historical form and force into fetish, into a fetish of avant-garde, into a static object of admiration that is completely detached from the realities, but has a very holy or sacred status in the mind of the kibbutz. And that makes it, on the one hand, very powerful national symbol, but on the other hand, something that is frozen in time and becomes gradually more and more politically, socially irrelevant, as we see, marginal and irrelevant, in part because this change, this conceptual change, does not enable it to reimagine itself. Something happens there in the ability to tell a new story that will move the kibbutz back, indeed, to the center of the stage. And I think I leave it here because I see now at the time that, yeah, I want to have time for questions. And
all righty. Thank you so much. That was a very interesting tour de force. I think that, people will be benefiting a great deal from reading the whole book. It's really multi-layered, and it has a very, very compelling argument. So, as we allow people to type their questions in the dedicated Q&A box, I'd like to start and take advantage of my role as the mediator and you talked about the fact that the kibbutz was not able to reinvent itself to some extent. But nevertheless, in the early 1950s, the kibbutz is split. We can talk about Ashdod Yaakov and Harod. And so they do look inside and they see kind of the schisms within. And what does that say about the movement as a whole, about the structure of the kibbutz? So they are able to kind of to evolve, nevertheless, in different ways, perhaps, the ones that you perhaps you don't feel are sufficient in that sense. But they do try to do that, and they achieve that.
Right. Well, I deal a lot with the schism, the split in a kibbutz Mochad in the 50s. I see it as a result of the shock. It's a process that starts already in the 40s. And specifically, if you want to go here a little bit political history, I don't know how much we're going to go in the nitty-gritty parts of it. But in the 40s, created a situation, there was a situation in which a kibbutz Mochad, which was very general in its political affiliations from its inception, it did not have one party for everyone. It was like, it had all kinds of streams. But in the 40s, we see that there are members of the kibbutz that are not members of the party. After the split of Achdut HaAvoda from Mapai, and then you have a very big majority of 40%. It's a big majority of Mapai supporters inside of a kibbutz movement that is led by a different party, which is Achdut HaAvoda, that supports all of the things that we just mentioned. Land, Palmach, the greater land of Israel, the Palmach as an activist militia force, orientation to the Soviet Union, which was a big issue during the schism, and Mapai leads in a different way. And then you have great majority of Mapai supporters inside of the Ben-Gurionistim, inside of the kibbutz. And a lot of the things is the inability of the kibbutz to kind of like find its place. And it tears apart. You look at it as something that is like regeneration or innovation. If you read the sources that I quote and translate in the book, they call it assassination in the life of the kibbutz. Right. Ben-Gurion, I wrote a book about the kibbutz, not knowing that I'm writing a book about Ben-Gurion as well. Ben-Gurion was the Antichrist, right? So those who supported Ben-Gurion, for example, in the pro-Western orientation, or in the partition of the land since the 1940s, particularly after Biltmore 1942. These people are they are splitting from the road of the Kibbutz Amochad, Tabenkin, and these people, and they basically make in this course of 4 years, from 1951 to 1952, 55, the years of the split, they make the Kibbutz Amochad from the leading, largest, and most prominent kibbutz movement to the smallest one, and the one that wanted all the time in very activist way to foray, to go to settle the land, to settle the frontier, to almost completely paralyzed movement that lost all of demographically, lost its forces, lost its cadres, its forces. Most of the settlement after the foundation of the state is done by the government, by the state itself. So the schism is a result and catalyst of trauma and shock. The schism is in part because the Kibbutz Amochad could not reimagine itself and adjust to the state. So those who were supporting the state and supporting Ben-Gurion split. And maybe I'll give one example for that that is also in the book, the famous example of the split in Kibbutz Bet Hashita, that almost half of his population in the 50s moved to Kibbutz Ayelet HaShachar, which was a kibbutz that belonged later to Ichud HaKvutzot VaKibbutzim and supported Ben-Gurion. I bring in the chapter about the land something really, I think, telling how at the night of November 29, 1947, right, the night in which here in New York, in Lake Success, the UN votes for the partition plan, the supporters, the majority, the people of Kibbutz Amochad, say this is an abortive state. They say, when a woman has a premature baby, do you celebrate? You don't. And they don't want to have a party in the kibbutz, not even a special assembly, not to put the flag, not nothing. And the opponents, people who support Mapai, 40% of the people in the kibbutz, say, what is it? This is a huge moment in Jewish history, unprecedented one. What is it? We don't even celebrate. We don't even, raise a toast. And Avraham Aderet, one of the people who split from Bet Hashita, is quoted in the book talking about this night in very, very emotional ways, and shows you how much, even when the history changes so rapidly and so radically, the kibbutz stick to that, and that in part causes the split that later diminished the kibbutz Amochad and made it even more marginalized. So yeah, and Ashdod Yaakov that you mentioned, of course, they are the first kibbutz. That's where it started, actually.
Yeah. We have a question from the audience that in a way kind of chimes with what you just talked about with the role of Tabenkin and Ben-Gurion. To what extent was this kind of a personal debate or a personal feud between the two that kind of had ideological or kind of had ripple effects across the movement, so to speak?
Yeah, well, when we talk about politics, we also talk about, urges and personal and it's very, we can't, separate egos and questions like that. And generally, as I said at the beginning, the historiography tends to see it all in terms of, if not a personal ego, so institutional ego and the marginalization. I agree that, of course, it exists. But I think that mainly the question is how someone like Tabenkin, for example, cannot lead its own national vision, because it's not really a competition after that, right? It's not really a competition when you talk about the prime minister. And the thing is that a kibbutz was never so much political in the sense of political mechanism. It was just very, very, very prominent in implementing the policy of the issue and the decisions of the issue, but the kibbutz was part of the decision making. So there was a correlation between the way they went in the service of what they saw and called and understood as the national missions and the way they lived. Once the national missions changed, they were not able to make this jump, to kind of like say, okay, we have an alternative a vision that we can or would like to implement in a way that responds to reality. Their alternative vision stayed in the world of the Yishuv. I'll give you another example. 1955, Kibbutz HaMeochad is rewriting its, let's call it conceptual creed. I don't want to say ideological, but what are the main values that it stands for? It's 1955, right? 7 years after the foundation of the state. And yet still, this is the, of course, the wholeness of the land. But the way they speak about the values, they don't call them Israeli, they call them Eretz Israeli. Eretz Israel is a yeshuv concept. We are 7 years into Israel now. And they say, Kibbutz HaMeochad's mission is to integrate all the newcomers in the spirit of Eretz Israel. The state is almost not a function there. And so how can you beat your enemy, even if it's a personal rivalry, if you don't even recognize it as such, so to speak, right? What are you fighting here? You're fighting a lost cause because the historical reality changed dramatically at all levels. And I'm mainly interested in the conceptual level, at the level of how one imagines their place in the world. And here we see that beyond any personal political rivalry, there is a stagnation that needs to be accounted for.
Yeah, it's stagnation perhaps, but on the other hand, it's also as we just talked, it's kind of this inability to reconcile the values or the principles, the ideological ones, and the reality that has been changing, right? Privatization in the 1980s and 1990s, industrialization earlier, before that. So moving from agrarian communities into something that creates or manufactures faucets or stationary equipment or socks. In the case of Kibbutz Yasu, where I live, it didn't chime, it didn't work well because the structure was different. The original idea was somewhat or dramatically different. It just didn't seem to be holding water, as one would say.
Well, I think the crisis of the kibbutz, which usually described, as you said, with the 80s and 90s and privatization, and especially after the upheaval of 1977, I think the main crisis, the profound crisis, or maybe if I want to be dramatic, I like to be dramatic sometimes, the end of the kibbutz is in 1948. It's in 1948. It's in the moment in which the Jewish self-determination or sovereignty in the land was not realized in the way the kibbutz imagined it, and the kibbutz could not adjust its imagination. So sometimes I get the question, so how do you explain, for example, the prominence of kibbutz people in the army? Right. Or their economic success in the 60s. And the question, I say, I don't deny it, but the question is, who is leading? Who is following and who is leading? The kibbutz, the moment it could not be, and you see sources from the 40s, op-eds, addresses in conventions, and sometimes even minutes in closer talks, where they say, if we are not going to lead, we are going to be led. And the kibbutz is led. Once you are a high officer in the army, you already surrounded to the ethos of the state and disappeared as the alternative, the political, cultural, social alternative you sought to be.
Sure, you're nationalized. You become part and parcel. You become part of the establishment, so to speak. There's another very interesting observation from the audience, from Raya Medler, who says, I think residents of Kiryat Shmona today talk like Be'arvot HaNegev, Negba members, isn't it? They talk about their homes, their town, their life, not necessarily the state, perhaps kind of feeling abandoned.
Very good. Thank you. Thank
sacrificed?
You. Yeah, thank you very much for this. Who said?
Raya Medler, who's a member of the audience.
I am so sad that I can't see everybody. But absolutely, and I think I see Kiryat Shmona, but I think if you see Eli mentioned that he's from the Gaza envelope. I don't know. I don't like this expression, but you used it, so
that's
the expression. If you see the kibbutzim today, kibbutzim since October 7, right? It's the return of the militia, not only the militias that we talk about, the IDF in a critical way, and I'm not going to go into what's going on in Gaza at the moment, but the very fact that Kitot HaKonenut, right, the local units were, and there was no army, where is the state, right? It's Bibi, Netanyahu is all the time compared to Ben-Gurion in all kind of ways, but it's completely opposite here. Ben-Gurion tells them, no, you are not fighting on En-Harod or Mishmar HaEmek or Dgania. You are fighting for the state, for this abstract idea that you don't identify with, maybe, or it's not real, but that's what you are fighting for. And now what we see is that people fight for their home literally with on that horrible Shabbat of October 7, but ever since, and by the way, ever since, kibbutz movement is almost a government within a government. If you look at the way the kibbutz movement deal with the crisis following October 7, be it people that were evacuated from homes and the economic damages and all the other damages, the kibbutz movement almost founded almost an alternative kind of government using all kind of ex-officials and volunteers that help them to give an answer to the kibbutzim that the government is not giving.
Yeah.
Ben-Gurion is trying to tell them something else. He says, this immediate connection to the concrete is, the fulfillment is not the kibbutz, the fulfillment is the state.
Yeah, no kibbutz is an island, essentially. You're not an island. You can't be an island. You're part of something bigger, and the bigger part is the state of Israel, as such.
Right, but for them, it touches upon, it's a completely different political theology, if you want. That's what we talked about before, right? What is sacred? And how does the absolute touches the concrete, the reality? So for them, it's completely disorienting. And today we see this disorientation from the different side or different angle, because today they tell them you are on your own, right? The communities need to fight to look how communities fought for the hostages to come back, but I'm talking about even at the level of combat at that day. There were people, civilians, with the rifles or whatever they had there, had to protect the kibbutzim. This is militia par excellence, as opposed to army.
Yeah.
So we see, I think, the creation of mamlachtiyut, of statism, in 48, and the dismantling of it in many ways today. That's why I picked, from all the many examples in the book, I picked that one because I thought it will resonate with what we see today.
We have 1 more minute. So in a sentence, how is the kibbutz remembered today in the Israeli collective memory?
how it is remembered today. I think that well, in a sentence.
In a sentence, yes, I know. I'm a very harsh professor.
It's a very, very complicated issue, but I think apropos October 7, that somewhat tragically, after years of irrelevance and even defiance of all kind of contexts, we didn't talk here about, or we touched briefly on the Mizrahi question that is shaping a lot of the perception of the kibbutz, particularly since the 90s, but even before, but in the discourse. What happens is that October 7 somewhat kind of like pushed the kibbutz back into the arms of the Zionist consensus. Suddenly we see the people who sit on the borders and right. Of course, they are leftists still for this government. I do like that because I also have some things to say about that, but not today. And at the same time, they are seen as, you know, people who work the land, agriculture, or defense, all of the ancient tropes of narrating the kibbutz are now coming to the fore in a way that also need to be critically examined. But I think if we can say something, one thing, that would be probably that.
I think there's a new book project somewhere there in between the lines.
Only one?
Multiple.
Yeah.
Alrighty, folks. Thank you so much for coming, Professor Libman. Thank you so much for this conversation. Congratulations on the book. I think it's very worthwhile to explore. There's more layers. There's richness of data there that I strongly recommend.
I hope I gave you a sense. It's condensed, but I encourage you to explore more if you're interested. And of course, I'm happy to be in touch or dialogue with everyone who is interested with question. I'm sorry I couldn't see and interact with the audience, but hopefully some things pass.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, you all. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thank you, Eli. Thank you.
Thank you so much, folks.